All right, guys, looks like we're live. Just give me a second to make sure we're all good. Let me know if the audio is all good in the chat. I did replace my microphone, so we shouldn't be choppy anymore. Are we good? What's going on? Yeah, okay. So, we're getting into the ritual of transcendent magic. This is chapter 1. We did the intro last week. We're starting to get into the practice. I read the first couple of paragraphs, and I can guarantee you this stream is going to go hard. Éliphas has not let us down at all. It's very powerful stuff. Before we get into it, I also want to encourage you guys to follow me on Substack because it's totally uncensored. And a couple of actually a whole shit ton of extraordinary things have kind of coagulated in my world in the last couple of days. One of them being that I have made a case for acacia rue being the psychoactive beverage in the Kaikian as opposed to ergot. That is like 100% solid according to all of the AI analysis I've been able to do, and also ergot just makes no sense really for a number of reasons. So I'm going to publish that there first, and then also, if you guys follow me, you might remember this idea that I had about a sort of conversion layer at the quantum level that would function as the veil that's been described in the Western occult tradition. So translating the ideal to the actual. And I just kind of intuited what all the components would be. And one of them, I had no idea what it was at all. But no guesses, I just knew intuitively what I needed, and they all turned out to be correct. And then last night I watched a couple of videos, the most important one being about the Langland project, which is based on, or I guess not based on, but it grew out of the Langland conjecture, which is a huge problem in mathematics. And basically what they're trying to do is come up with a unified theory of mathematics similar to the unified theory in physics that has been sought after forever. At any rate, one of the major components of the 800-page proof that they published was a description of these components that I described as the veil doing exactly what I described, collectively, and it's really wild. So also there will be a video on that and an explanation. I'll probably also do it here, but I'm kind of shifting my focus there because I'm not demonetized there and I can say anything I want, which is not the case on YouTube. So I'm sorry, let me shrink this and check in with the chat, make sure audio and everything is good before we jump in. Audio is gravy. Okay, cool. I wish I could tell whether I'd actually gone live also on TikTok. I hope I have, guys. I don't know how to switch. Hey, did I just do it? Yeah, I don't know how to switch to the other chat. So if you're there on TikTok, I appreciate you guys. Welcome. Unfortunately, on TikTok, I only get distributed to Peru for some reason. Which would be fine, except, people don't necessarily speak English here. So I did finally get monetized on TikTok, and insanely, if I had been approved before I got all the viral videos, they would owe me $20,000 to $40,000, and I'm going to get $0.00 for that. But at least if I do it again now, I'll get compensated, which will never happen on YouTube. Unfortunately, I'm banned from AdSense for life. For absolutely nothing. It's true. Okay, so chapter 1, preparations. Every intention which does not assert itself by deeds is a vain intention, and the speech which expresses it is idle speech. It is action which proves life and establishes will. Hence it is said in the sacred and symbolical books that men will be judged not according to their thoughts and their ideas, but according to their works. We must act in order to be. This is obviously an incredibly important thing, but it relates to the thought forms that I was talking about in a few streams back, I guess it was. This is one of my arguments about Christianity, that people say that it's not the thing, it's how people have applied the thing. And my argument is that nothing can do anything that it doesn't contain in its nature. You will not get a pig from an acorn, So this is another, in terms of healing, this is a tremendous thing to always consider. When you judge yourself preemptively, you just have to remember it's not about that. It's about what you do. We all impose incredible strictures on our potential success by defining ourselves according to limitations, right? Also, ego inflation, you can check your ego inflation, because if you start taking credit for being something that you have not produced any evidence of, that's a good way to humble yourself. We have, therefore, to treat in this place of the grand and terrific question of magical works. We are concerned no longer with theories and abstractions. We approach realities. And we are about to place the rod of miracles in the hands of the adept, saying to him at the same time, be not satisfied with what we tell you, act for yourself. We have to deal here with works of relative omnipotence, with the means of seizing upon the greatest secrets of nature and compelling them into the service of an enlightened and inflexible will. Be not satisfied with what we tell you, act for yourself. This is like the main reason that the mysteries were banned and magic has been demonized, at least this type of magic, because the reality is no spiritual knowledge can really be taught. I mean, it can be suggested and people might believe it and it might even be true. But knowing in the GNO sense requires direct experience. You have to undergo certain experiences in order to have certain knowledge and understanding. Otherwise, it's just bullshit. And if you really think about the structure of all of the institutionalized religions, that's the opposite of what they ask of you. Just to believe absolutely, without proof, without reason, for no other motivation really than fear. Most known magical rituals are either mystifications or enigmas, and we are about to rend for the first time after so many centuries the veil of the occult sanctuary. To reveal the holiness of mysteries is to provide a remedy for their profanation. This enterprise, possibly the most intrepid which it has been permitted the human mind to conceive and carry out. He's basically talking about trying to disperse the initiated knowledge to the profane and to the masses, which is dangerous not only to the initiate that's doing it, but also to the masses themselves. Because, even for someone who is fairly developed, as I was when I encountered these things, I guess to an extent that it was significant, like really significant, I had more enthusiasm than wisdom, and therefore there were messes made. But in the case of someone who might be even less prepared, the results can be madness, destruction, corruption. So it's kind of a situation where the adepts feel like their hands have been forced. We're going to be annihilated. We're going to annihilate ourselves unless we're able to elevate consciousness. And luckily for us, that doesn't just happen through articulation. We have entrainment and entanglement and other forces that sort of bind all of us together so that if someone ascends, everyone ascends, if minutely. The trick now is to get enough people engaged in this process, but, effectively. And there's a lot of distractions and traps and illusions and whatnot out there. I forgot to mention in the beginning of the stream also that, you guys know how important the solar storms are to me and the solar maximum. It's going to have its biggest party on or about my birthday, which blew my mind. And also 2 days after my birthday, all of the planets are going to be in conjunction with their opposites, which is just wild. Yeah. Anyways, that wasn't really the point. The point was that this moment is the transition period where, like, during the solar storms, the magnetic field is weakened, right? And we generally experience a whole lot of introspection and revelations. You know, I had memories that I had apparently repressed surface. Parapsychological type phenomena increase significantly, synchronicities and whatnot. But then when the solar maximum calms down, the electric field is again strong, and that empowers us to use the stuff that we've learned during the chaotic period leading up to the calm and put that stuff into action, right? So I'm mostly just mentioning this because over the next couple of months until July, this is our window for maximizing our own potential, developing our own understanding, and training with others. And then the time to act concisely is going to be July to September. Magical operations are the exercise of a natural power, but one superior to the ordinary forces of nature. They are the result of a science and a practice which exalt human will beyond its normal limits. The supernatural is only the natural in an extraordinary grade, or it is the exalted miracle. A miracle is a phenomenon which strikes the multitude because it is unexpected. The astonishing is that which astonishes. Miracles are effects which surprise those who are ignorant of their causes, or assign them causes which are not in proportion to such effects. Miracles exist only for the ignorant, but as there is scarcely an absolute science among men, the supernatural can still obtain, and does so indeed for the whole world. Let us set out by saying that we believe in all miracles because we are convinced and certain, even from our own experience, of their entire possibility. There are some which we do not explain, though we regard them as no less explicable. So let's tear that apart a little bit. Seems kind of contradictory. You know, he's saying only the ignorant believe in miracles, but yet we believe in miracles from our own experience. And what was the other thing that? And the ones that we do not explain, we regard as no less explicable, which only means that we have ideas that are probably correct about the mechanisms behind telepathy, precognition. You know, we do not know the answers for some other things, but we know that there are mechanisms behind them. And the belief in superstition basically arose from people explaining things in ignorance of their actual mechanisms. And that falsehood has been amplified and exploited by people who seek to oppress the higher knowledge that actually lies behind those miracles, right? But in order to work miracles, we must be outside the ordinary conditions of humanity. We must either be abstracted by wisdom or exalted by madness, either superior to all passions or beyond them through ecstasy or frenzy. Such is the first and most indispensable preparation of the operator. Hence, by a providential or fatal law, the magician can only exercise omnipotence in inverse proportion to his material interest. The alchemist makes so much more the gold as he is the more resigned to privations, and the more esteems that poverty which protects the secrets of the magnum opus. Only the adept whose heart is passionless will dispose of the love and hate of those whom he would make instruments of his science. The myth of Genesis is eternally true, and God permits the tree of science to be approached only by those men who are sufficiently strong and self-denying not to covet its fruits. Now, let this not be misunderstood. You'll remember in the very beginning of the book, he echoed a sentiment of mine that I usually explain this way, if I can remember. Spirituality is usually shunned by people who want power, and power is usually shunned by people who chase spirit. if that condition continues, we are doomed. Something to that effect. And Levi wrote that in the beginning, that one of the issues we have is that the people that should have the power don't even want it. And we can't have that, So in my own case, when I was really in a storm of manifestation and I was pulling off all sorts of improbable to the point of nearly being impossible stunts all the time and all of this, it's not that I didn't want money at all, but I honestly have only wanted money in order to maintain freedom and to affect the changes that I am here to catalyze. I really have no interest in it beyond that. And that's what's meant by this. It's not really true that you need to remain in abject poverty or anything like that. It's just that, any kind of greed or selfishness really is mental illness. And it's not necessarily just mental illness. It's also the residue of instinct, But in reality, if you have any desire to retain more than you need, which doesn't mean that you don't have abundance, more than you need to maintain freedom for the rest of your life and not be a slave and make your own decisions. I'm not talking about subsistence level. It's not that, but you have to have this balance of just sensible ethics. Ye therefore who seek in science a means to satisfy your passions, pause in this fatal way, death. This is the meaning of the vulgar tradition that the devil ends sooner or later by strangling sorcerers. The magus must hence be impassible, sober, and chaste, disinterested, impenetrable, and inaccessible to any kind of prejudice or terror. He must be without bodily defects and proof against all contradictions and all difficulties. The first and most important of magical operations is the attainment of this rare preeminence. We have said that impassioned ecstasy may produce the same results as absolute superiority. But this is true as to the issue, but not to the direction of magical operations. Passion forcibly projects the astral light and impresses unforeseen movements on the universal agent. But it cannot check with the facility that it impels, and its destiny then resembles Hippolytus dragged by his own horses, or Phalaris himself victimized by the instrument of torture which he had invented for others. Dried pineapple. It's delicious, man. Where are we at? Human volition realized by action is like a cannonball and recedes before no obstacle. It either passes through it or is buried in it. But if it advances with patience and perseverance, it is never lost. It is like the wave which returns incessantly and wears away iron in the end. Man can be modified by habit, which becomes, according to the proverb, his second nature. By means of preserving and graduated athletics, the powers and activity of the body can be developed to an astonishing extent. It is the same with the powers of the soul. Would you reign over yourselves and others? Learn how to will. How can one learn to will? This is the first arcanum of magical initiation, and it was to make it understood fundamentally that the ancient depositories of priestly art surrounded the approaches of the sanctuary with so many terrors and illusions. They did not believe in a will until it had produced its proofs, and they were right. Power is justified by victories. Indolence and forgetfulness are enemies of will, and for this reason all religions have multiplied their observances and made their worship minute and difficult. The more we restrain ourselves for an idea, the greater is the strength we acquire within the scope of that idea. Are not mothers more partial to the children who have caused them most suffering and cost them most anxieties? So does the power of religions reside exclusively in the inflexible will of those who practice them. So long as there is one faithful person to believe in the holy sacrifice of the Mass, there will be a priest to celebrate it for him. And so long as there is a priest who daily recites his breviary, there will be a pope in the world. Observances, apparently most insignificant and most foreign in themselves to the proposed end, lead, notwithstanding, to that end by education and exercise of will. If a peasant rose up every morning at 2 or 3 o'clock and went daily a long distance from home to gather a sprig of the same herb before the rising of the sun, he would be able to perform a great number of prodigies by merely carrying this herb upon his person. For it would be the sign of his will, and it would become, by his will itself, all that he required to become in the interest of his desires. In order to do a thing, we must believe in the possibility of our doing, and this faith must forthwith be translated into acts. When a child says, "I cannot," his mother answers, "Try." Faith does not even try. It begins with the certitude of completing, and it proceeds calmly, as if omnipotence were at its disposal and eternity before it. What seek you, therefore, from the science of the Magi? So he's talking about, when you limit yourself, not in the way that I was talking about a few minutes ago, but in the way that I did, for example, when I was really, really dedicated to music. I didn't drink because I knew it would compromise my ability to function the next day. I didn't do anything that would get in the way at all. Every single thing I did, that was the master, and that is the same with any true will that a person is trying to exercise. And another crucial point is that he talks about how you must be absolutely committed to this fundamental function that you have, that is in order for magic to work, right? That is one of the main reasons why, the only reason really, why the overlords have created this crisis of purpose in people, right? Because you will not find the level of commitment that is required to have that absolute conformity with your will unless you are serving some sort of purpose that is clear and important to you. And unless that purpose is aligned with greater forces, it's probably still folly, So note this. Dare to formulate your desire, then set to work at once, and do not cease acting after the same manner and for the same end. What you will shall come to pass, and for you and by you it has indeed already begun. Sixtus V said, while watching his flocks, I desire to be pope. You are a beggar and you desire to make gold, set to work and never leave off. I promise you in the name of science all the treasures of Flamel and Raymond and Lily. What is the first thing to do? Believe in your power and then act. But how act? Rise daily at the same hour and that early, bathe at a spring before daybreak and in all seasons. Never wear dirty clothes, wash them yourself if needful. Accustom yourself to voluntary privations, that you may be better able to bear those which come without seeking. Then silence every desire which is foreign to the fulfillment of the great work. What? By bathing daily in a spring I shall make gold? You will work in order to make it. It is a mockery. No, it is an arcanum. How can I make use of an arcanum which I fail to understand? Believe and act. You will understand later. That's a fact. That is a fact. A lot of things discourage people to the extent that they give up on them because you understand later, like music theory. I was stuck on so many things for so long because I wanted to understand all this stuff, and you can't do that. You just have to memorize all this stuff and do it, and then eventually, once you've aggregated all this information and experience, suddenly you understand. The same is true of magical secrets. This is one of the reasons that I say that every single video on the 33rd degree secret of Freemasonry is absolute bullshit, because it cannot be articulated and understood in that way. There's no one's going to be able to tell you. It's not just not written down to maintain the secrecy, it is, but it's also because it would be pointless. That's not how these things are learned. So it's ironic because we basically talk about certainty and not faith, right? But in a certain sense, there is a prerequisite of something like faith. Could have sworn. Oh, and then there's this reality. Any desired change can be affected by the application of the proper kind and degree of force through the proper medium to the proper object. If you conform to the postulate, then you will succeed in every case. But you must exactly fulfill all of the conditions. One day a person said to me, "I would that I could be a fervent Catholic, but I am a Voltairean." "What would I not give to have faith?" I replied. "Say I would no longer. Say I will, and I promise you that you will believe. You tell me you are a Voltairean, and of all the various presentations of faith, that of the Jesuits is most repugnant to you, but at the same time seems the most powerful and desirable. Performing the exercises of St. Ignatius again and again without allowing yourself to be discouraged, and you will attain the faith of a Jesuit. The result is infallible. And should you then have the simplicity to ascribe it to a miracle, you deceive yourself now in thinking that you are a Voltairean. An idle man will never become a magician. Magic is an exercise of all hours and all moments. The operator of great works must be absolute master of himself. He must know how to conquer the allurements of pleasure, appetite, and sleep. He must be insensible to success and to indignity. His life must be that of a will directed by one thought and served by entire nature, which he will have made subject to mind in his own organs, and by sympathy in all the universal forces which are their correspondents. All faculties and all senses should share in their work. Nothing in the priest of Hermes has the right to remain idle. Intelligence must be formulated by signs and summed by characters or panticles. Will must be determined by words and must fulfill words by deeds. The magical idea must be rendered into light for the eyes, harmony for the ears, perfumes for the sense of smell, savors for the plate, objects for the touch. The operator, in a word, must realize in his whole life that he wishes to realize in the world without him, that which he wishes to realize. He must become a magnet to attract the desired thing, and when he shall be sufficiently magnetic, he must be convinced that the thing will come of itself and without thinking of it. It is important for the magus to be acquainted with the secrets of science, but he may know them by intuition and without formal learning. That's so crazy. Do you guys remember what I started talking about on this? How I had just intuited all these components of the what they call in the occult the veil. And it's wild. He just happened to mention that. Without formal learning, solitaries living in the habitual contemplation of nature frequently divine her harmonies and are more instructed in their simple good sense than doctors, whose natural discernment is falsified by the sophistry of the schools. That is a huge thing, man. One of the reasons that I've put all this work into trying to produce this evidence for this transconscious reception of knowledge is that I've noticed that intuition has been sort of deleted from science, right? And that's not helpful. It also represents or is conducive of creating an incomplete model, you know? It doesn't work. And one of the even more detrimental side effects of this circumstance is that people have lost the ability to see what is implied or to accept what is implied by an aggregate of circumstantial evidence, right? If there's enough of it, then you should take it seriously, basically. And to take any line of reasoning too far, you're going to end up stupid, you know, professing to be wise, they have become fools. And so, for example, the universal mind evidence, you know, we have morphological evidence, we have evidence that is not mechanistically incongruent with physics at this point. We have evidence of field-based intelligence and memory and the agency of memories, even as if they're an independent entity once they've been created, you know, and on and on. And I've presented this in comments threads before, and because there's no mathematical way of expressing this, people are like, well, that's not proof. It's just a couple of circumstantial evidence coincidences. You're stupid, you know? It's wild, man. It's wild. You get laughed at and called an idiot by idiots because they're idiots, basically, if you're not an idiot in this world. And a lot of that is not because they're actually idiots. It's just that there has been a sort of set of parameters imposed on their, perceptual apparatus and their intellectual apparatus so that they're restrained to too narrow of a vantage point. True practical magicians are almost invariably found in the country and are frequently uninstructed persons and simple shepherds. Furthermore, certain physical organizations are better adapted than others for the revelations of the occult world. There are sensitive and sympathetic natures with whom intuition in the astral light is, so to speak, inborn. Certain afflictions and certain complaints can modify the nervous system and, independently of the concurrence of the will, may convert it into a divinatory apparatus of more or less perfection. But these phenomena are exceptional, and generally magical power should and can be acquired by perseverance and labor. There are also some substances which produce ecstasy and dispose towards the magnetic sleep. There are some which place at the service of imagination all the most lively and highly colored reflections of the elementary light, but the use of such substances is dangerous, for they commonly occasion stupefaction and intoxication. They are used notwithstanding, but in carefully calculated quantities and under wholly exceptional circumstances. He's talking, of course, about psychedelics. Probably the acacia rue combination that I was mentioning earlier in the Kaikion, but also it's true that a lot of occult practitioners in Europe used poison path plants like mandrake and henbane and deadly nightshade and all this kind of thing. I don't recommend that, and I don't see where the benefit could really come from. I have had prophetical visions. The one time I accidentally took too much Toei. But overall, it's a deliriant, and I don't see any reason to consume something that toxic just to become confused and dehydrated. Of course, I'm sure there are people that would take issue with that statement. He who decides to devote himself seriously to magical works after fortifying his mind against all danger of hallucination and fright must purify himself without and within for 40 days. The number 40 is sacred, and its very figure is magical. In Arabic numerals, it consists of the circle, which is the type of the infinite, and of 4, which sums the triad by unity. It's also stability, and in Kabbalah, 0 sort of amplifies consciousness. So if you think of 4, like the fourfold breath, when you're starting to establish your ritual space, and then you designate the 4 points of the directions and the 4 elements, this is the stability of the creation, right? So if you have a 4 already and you add a 0, you have that creation, but now it's amplified in consciousness to another level. In Roman numerals, arranged after the following manner, it represents the sign of the fundamental doctrine of Hermes and the character of the seal of Solomon. Let's check in with the chat. It's kind of been a while, been going on without any interaction here. All right, I open description, one of my first occult books. Starting to skip a bit. Hold on, let me check. I don't know why that would be. My internet seems pretty stable at the moment. That's fine. Oh, all good. All right, I'll put my headphones on, and that way I can hear what's going on and maybe fix it if it starts up again. Oh, wow, is that TikTok? Hey, wow. Yo, how's it going, everybody? Every 109 viewers. See you later, guys. We're going over to TikTok. 199. Wow. The purification of the Magick consists in abstinence from coarse enjoyments and a temperate and vegetable diet, in refraining from intoxicating drink, and in regulating the hours of sleep. This preparation has been indicated and represented in all forms of worship by a period of penitence and trials preceding the symbolical feasts of life renewal. Man, that is just wild. So when I underwent my sort of spontaneous initiation, I went for 4 days and nights without any sleep or water or food. I think I ate a little bit of an orange on the 4th day, cheated a little bit. And what was the bit that just really struck me? I don't remember what I stopped the comments about. It was something important. Oh, and then the penitence and trials. So there was a period of like recognition of all my flaws and how to, or I don't know if all of, but a lot of stuff came up. And then a week of 7 days where I went out and faced a different fear every night. And I honestly didn't even know I was doing that until like the 3rd night. It finally occurred to me what was going on. I just kind of had this impulse to go out into the desert and walk around, and I would encounter things with a different lesson every night. And they were trials, facing fears. In fact, the last one was really crazy because I was telling my friend on the 7th day as we were walking out of the field that the last fear that I hadn't faced was cops. And as soon as I said the word cops, we were lit up by a cop for absolutely no reason. And what went down after that is absolutely insane. And I'm not going to get into it because I've told the story quite a few times. But the point of it, I realized immediately, was that I had been telling my friend that if you do not fear, but it has to be absolute, nothing will affect you. So I basically went up to this cop and demonstrated that by like trying to provoke him in every way possible, trying to get myself arrested, confessing to having DMT in my pocket and like too many pot plants at my house. I was allowed to have like 12 and I had 190 or something. And I told him that, and I was like, the house is right there. And he was saying things, weird stuff that didn't make any sense. Like, well, I don't care what you do in your own house. And I was like, I'm not in my house. I'm in the middle of the street and you just lit me up. Like, what is going on? But I had absolutely no fear. And at the end of the exchange, he actually asked me if he could go, and drove away real slow with his window open and his lights still on. Like, he was just confused. But yeah, that's how that goes. The atmosphere must be purified at rising and retiring with a perfume composed of the juice of laurels, salt, and camphor, white resin and sulfur, repeating at the same time the 4 sacred names, which turn successively towards the 4 cardinal points. We must divulge to no one the works that we accomplish, for, as already said in the Doctrine, mystery is the exact and essential condition of all the operations of science, except I will tell you that what he's talking about is just the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. This must be performed twice a day for the first year. The inquisitive must be misled by the pretense of other occupations and other researches, such as chemical experience for industrial purposes, hygiene prescriptions, the investigation of some natural secrets, and so on, but the forbidden name of magic must never be pronounced. The magist must be isolated at the beginning and difficult to approach, so that he may concentrate his power and select his points of contact, but in proportion as he is austere and inaccessible at first, so will he be popular and sought after when he shall have magnetized his chain and chosen his place in a current of ideas and of light. A laborious and poor existence is so favorable to practical initiation that the greatest masters have preferred it, even when the wealth of the world was at their disposal. Then it is that Satan, that is, the spirit of ignorance, who scorns, suspects, and detests science, because at heart he fears it, comes to tempt the future master of the world by saying to him, "If thou art the Son of God, command these stones to become bread." Then it is that mercenary men seek to humiliate the Prince of Knowledge by perplexing, depreciating, or sordidly exploiting his labor. The slice of bread that he deigns to knead is broken into 10 fragments so that he may 10 times stretch forth his hand. But the magist does not even smile at the absurdity and calmly pursues his work. So, the anti-science sort of trend that we have now, and the religious tendency to disregard science and to ignore it, that they think that they're like overcoming the matrix brainwashing, but they're actually succumbing to it. A lot of the propaganda works that way, where people think that they are, becoming in the know and they are part of the movement to overthrow the masters, but in reality, they're actually succumbing to their propaganda, and they're, professing to be wise. They are fools. So you got to watch out for that. We must hold ourselves. So far as may be possible, we must avoid the sight of hideous objects and uncomely persons, must decline eating with those whom we do not esteem, and must live in the most uniform and studied manner. We must hold ourselves in the highest respect and must consider that we are dethroned sovereigns who consent to existence in order to reconquer our crowns. We must be mild and considerate to all, but in social relations must never permit ourselves to be absorbed and must withdraw from circles in which we cannot acquire some initiative. Finally, we may and should fulfill the duties and practice the rites of the cultist to which we belong. Now, of all forms of worship, the most magical is that which realizes the miraculous, which bases the most inconceivable mysteries upon the highest reasons, which has lights equivalent to its shadows, which popularizes miracles and incarnates God in all mankind by faith. This religion has existed always in the world, and under many names has been ever the one and ruling religion. It has now among the nations of the earth 3 apparently hostile forms, which are, however, destined to unite before long for the constitution of our universal church. I refer to the Greek Orthodoxy, Roman Catholicism, and a final transfiguration of the religion of Buddha. I think their Islam is pretty hostile to truth as well. There was a couple of things that I felt like I should... about the socialization, this is extremely important, and it's not just about who we hang out with and have over for tea. It's about where we work. It's about if you have a narcissistic family member, you cannot continue to interact with them. You must cut them off completely, And then also when you start to realize that you really cannot interact with people that are cut from a certain type of cloth. And this can lead to ego inflation. It can be caused by ego inflation to the extent that you avoid the wrong people. So an entirely balanced process of ascension is extremely important, because as you add velocity, miscalculations are more dramatically impactful, right? So you have been warned. We are living at a period when nothing remains to destroy and everything to remake. Remake what? The past? No one can remake the past. What then shall we reconstruct? Temples and thrones? To what purpose, since the former ones have been cast down? You might as well say my house has collapsed from age. Of what use is it to build another? But will the house that you contemplate erecting be like that which has fallen? No, for the one was old and the other will be new. Notwithstanding, it will always be a house. What more can you wish? Magical equilibrium. This is going to be interesting, but hold on, let me jump in with the chat. If you guys have any questions or comments or subjects that you would like me to weigh in on, I am always down for that. And then also please hit the like button, share, subscribe, consider becoming a patron. We're demonetized. You get access to a lot of content, premium content, and private Discord, and we are working on things in the Discord to empower the entire group in every way imaginable. So it is definitely worthwhile, and it is essential that we have some kind of support in order to justify the time that we put into this. Whoa, man. This TikTok is there's a lot of people, it seems, scrolling through it, but I don't know how many of them stick. All right, so where are we at here? You've convinced me to buy Bobinsana for the second time. I do ship Bobinsana paste, for sure. Okay, well, let's go a little bit further. I usually like to do these like one section at a time. When did we start? At 9:30 or 10? At 10? Yeah, all right. Well, let me see how long it is. 'Cause I really prefer to start them all at the beginning of a stream, but I don't see any questions from you guys in there, so just want to see if it's like crazy long. Uh-oh. Not the Goetia. Yeah, okay, it looks like it's not that long, so let's go for it. Unless I accidentally went a lot further than I thought. Bear with me for a second, guys. Ugh. How did I go so far? What's going on, you guys? Oh my God, I went like 100 pages, I think. How did that happen? All right, come on, man. Let's see if we can skip back a little bit. By the way, I am doing a birthday party because I'm turning 46. A birthday celebration of live music. Probably Saturday. My birthday's on Friday. Chapter 15. We're only on chapter 1. Oh my gosh. How did I get so lost, you guys? Anyways, what was I saying? Yeah, we're going to have live music. Maybe I'm just too lost and we are going to start the next one next time. And I'll just chat with you guys for a bit. Because I'm just completely lost now. Yeah, all right, guys. Sorry, I'm not going to go any further. But I will hang out and chat for a bit. I need to practice and work on my sound reinforcement stuff. Let's see. You've convinced me. I don't see it. No questions, comments, no subjects that anyone would like me to weigh in on. Do we got nothing for me tonight? Because if that's the case, then I will go. What's going on here? Why is my webcam not? Oh, it's up there. How does your ceremonies lend itself to understanding magic or vice versa? Okay, yeah, that's good. Hold on, I don't know what's going on. Stupid thing. There we go. Hello, everyone. Yeah. So, rituals, if they're engineered well, are about symbolism almost entirely. The idea is that we are refining our consciousness so that it is like laser precise. And the laser itself is electromagnetic energy. And so being that consciousness is very expansive and complex, at least as most humans are concerned, very complicated creatures, we compartmentalize things, right? So we have a direction and we have an element and we have an archangel, and they all represent symbols, right, that correspond with our internal environment. They are externalized archetypes or energies that reflect what is inside of us. And so in each of these directions, for example, you are concressing information into a single symbol, right? And this allows you to, it assists you in the process of focusing your consciousness into a laser-like beam. And that is one of the fundamental purposes of ritual. How I've learned about magic from ritual. You learn about life from ritual, and it depends on what you mean by magic. You know, when I drink ayahuasca and hold that kind of ceremony, there's a sort of dialogue with the universal mind or possibly with spirits. I've never really decided what I think they are. But I do receive conscious information or downloads in that way that are absolutely certain, 100% proven. There's no doubt that it's not a real phenomena. You experience telepathy on occasion in ways that is absolutely undeniable. You learn things about sound and the ability of sounds to interact with fields in ways that can affect living, breathing entities. So that's a difficult question to answer because there's so many different aspects of it. The thing to realize and the thing that's important is that a lot of people don't understand what ritual is. You have like Catholics that go to church and they go through all these motions and they have no idea what they are, but they feel a duty to go through these motions with no awareness of really what the purpose is or what the goal is, and it's actually pretty miserable. You watch their faces and they're just blank and bored and they just, They have no idea what they're doing or why. And it doesn't matter to them either, So the importance of it is that if you're going to perform ritual magic, that you have to understand the symbolism. You have to know why you're doing what you're doing. If you're going to do Liber Resh and, you're trying to work with the sun, then you need to understand the sun's role in your life and how the fields of electromagnetism are related to your consciousness. And, the scientific basis for all of these things, as Levi suggested in this book, is crucially important to be aware of because it assists you in your ability to develop faith or certainty in the effects of your actions. If you understand why it works and how it works, then you will have a much better chance of effectualizing a current that can actually have some sort of substantive effect on your environment, So the same is true of ritual, that you have to understand how things are interconnected, why they're interconnected, how you relate to your microcosm and how that microcosm relates to the external world. And then after you have engineered certain rituals, or once you have mastered, certain rituals, then you can sort of personalize them, personalized engineering of them, right? So when I do the LBRP, I don't just invoke the 4 archangels. I have someone below me, someone within me, and someone above me, and you can make other alterations, but not until you understand exactly what the function of everything in the ritual is, why you're doing it, and all that sort of stuff. So I hope that answers your question. But yeah, plant medicine ceremonies are more about learning about yourself in the universe than really magic, although there's no difference to an extent in all of those things. Ever since, I used to be an atheist and materialist, but I always knew something was missing. Terrence McKenna introduced me to the mysteries, and ever since things have been falling into place. Yeah. Ever read Aleister Crowley, Magic Without Tears? Sure have. Yeah, of course I've read that. Let's see. By the way, you guys on TikTok, if you want to pop any questions into the comment, the subject's basically the occult tonight, as it usually is. Please feel free to make contributions to the channel as well, because we like that. Okay, Magic Without Tears. There is some really interesting stuff in that book, actually, and I'm trying to recall like a really good example. One surprising thing that you'll find in that book is a mention that spirits aren't real in the objective sense, and he actually says that in Magic in Theory and Practice as well. It really shocks people, and they usually edit it out because people come into things with a sort of preconception, usually, that they are intent on maintaining, whether it's correct or not, So you see that a lot in this tradition, that people will sort of edit things that they don't want to be part of their belief system. And so he talks in there about how when we invoke like a solar angel or whatever, there's no actual angel in the sun that we're talking about. It's a representation of a certain frequency of consciousness or a certain energy. But not like a literal demon or spirit. In fact, demons and spirits don't exist at all except when in conjunction with human consciousness or consciousness in general. You know, it's like a vector being. They exist as a sort of fundamental or as a sort of presence in the electromagnetic field, you know, an archetype sort of thing in the electromagnetic field. And then when we have these interactions with them through ayahuasca, DMT, or whatever other kind of thing, the actual formulation of them has to do with our consciousness interfacing with the greater consciousness. That's why you almost will never hear exactly the same descriptions of different ayahuasca spirits from different tribes. And I know people see a lot of the same DMT entities, but generally speaking, in my experience, the Kofan and the Shuar and the Shipibo and the Quichua and Quechua do not have, and Ashinanka do not have the same ideas about what inhabits that realm and what these things look like. Because it's a combination of, it's like in the middle ground between objective and subjective experience. As far as everything falling into place when you find the mysteries and whatnot, I mean, you know, that's what it's all about. So congratulations, you know, it's about coming into homeostasis with your environment and learning objectivity. Really, objectivity is a foundational element of real Western occult tradition, you know, because you have to develop objectivity in regards to self in order to perform self-psychoanalysis. You're not going to analyze yourself objectively if you have too much bias, right? So it's a massively important thing. At the same time, you are not going to see things happening in the political world if you have bias, as they actually are. You are not. That's why they have two parties. Because they know that as long as they keep both sides biased, they're not going to see things for what they are. They can see things differently all they want. But the fact that they're seeing things differently also implies they're not seeing them as they are. Opinion applies to things like what kind of tobacco you like to smoke, whether or not you like the smell of a rose. It does not apply to truth. It doesn't. So, objectivity in ontological matters, you know, that is the first step on the path of becoming an initiate. To just be able to look. Problem with you is the problem with me. Got two good eyes, but we still can't see. Coming around the bend, you know it's the end. Fireman screams and the engine just gleams. Casey Jones, Grateful Dead, is about exactly this thing. And what is that? It's balance, you know. The fundamental thing, the fundamental truth of the universe is the interplay of opposites. And that is perfect balance. That is truth. You know, it's not a difficult equation. And you don't have to take any of it on faith, you know. And that's another thing that's tremendously helpful, at least for me, because you can see that every particle is balanced by an exact anti-corollary particle, you know, and if they collide, there's nothing left behind but photons. So we know that everything arises from light and everything returns to light, just as the Kabbalah described however many thousands of years ago. And no, it's not 200 years old, as some people say, or 300 years old. It definitely had precursors in Syria and Babylonia. Oh, and by the way, they just made matter out of light. It's a supermatter, they're calling it, and it is behaving as both a solid and a liquid somehow. I need to look more into this so I can describe it better. But so now we have evidence of both ends of the Kabbalistic creation story, that light created matter, and then matter becomes again light. No, I don't think colors are transformed on the astral plane. They are different. They're enhanced. But that would be really counterproductive too, because color is like sound. Difficult to explain, but okay, think about it this way. Visible light, which ironically is actually invisible until it hits something. Different types of radiation basically carry different types of information. So color is the same, and it could be even part of our perceptual apparatus that interprets the information as color. This is why in nature, yellow is often a sign of poison and so on. It's actually information that's being conveyed in that way. So on the astral plane, there are colors that do not exist in this realm. There are much more vivid colors. There are colors that are more real than the colors on this plane somehow. More vivid is not really even a fair description, because they're like more real. That's the only way I can describe it. A color that might be alive, on the plane of the astral, symbols are alive, information is alive, the universal mind is seen to thrive. It is evident that information has agency, just in the way that Michael Levin says that he thinks memories have agency, that they can decide to change and when to exert influence and whatnot, that they almost exist like thought forms once they've been created. This is the same of symbols and colors on the astral. Numbers also. Yeah, downloads is skill enhancement for sure. I mean, I know things about physics that I definitely should not know. And this last incident with the Calabi-Yau manifolds and the Euler formula and the Fourier transfers, there's absolutely no way that I could have possibly put those things together in the way that I did, and they were just published as having the exact function that I described, and I can prove this. A lot of you guys saw it. I put a video on or did a stream where I showed the breakdown of all this stuff months ago, and it was just published, I think, yesterday or the day before or something. So there's no doubt, you know what I mean? At this point, I've proven transconscious knowledge reception in videos numerous times. So it happens in all sorts of ways. But as far as like enhancing playing guitar and stuff, that's harder to tell, because you can have subconscious developments, like sometimes I'll quit playing for a week or something and I'll pick the guitar up and I've gotten better at stuff. And it's because, there's all sorts of processing going on just beneath the surface. So whether these are, downloads in that way, it's really difficult to think of the art that way. Certainly lyrics or songs, like I was driving along Highway 1 one time, and there was a female voice in my head that said, pull over and get out your notebook and pen. And I was like, damn, all right. And so I did it, and I wrote really fast all this stuff down, and I didn't even read it or think about it while I was writing it. And then I read it back to myself, and it was like, it's the Scarlet Woman, the Doomsday's Bride, the sun will drown in the tears she cries, and Holy Virgin, sacred horror, from the Book of Life, her pages torn, and all this just wild shit, you know? And I was like, holy crap, man, what is this, you know? So in that sense, and that's a common thing that people report, you know, to receive songs or, yeah, well, if you put it that way, sure, like songs that I'll just sit down and suddenly the whole song is there. You know, every little part is already there. And those are always the best songs. In fact, that's one of the reasons I've written so few songs, because if they don't come that way, they're probably not worth preserving in my world, you know. I'm trying to think if there's any other applicable sort of, you know, usually in my world, they have to do with neuroscience type things like consciousness and consciousness and or the relationship of consciousness to quantum mechanics. So like once I was thinking about nothing, just, I don't remember what, but the thought I had was nothing is faster than light. And this voice that I guess I can call my holy guardian angel said, consciousness is faster than light, immediately after I had that thought. And I was like, holy shit, that's correct. But I didn't have any way of contextualizing it until recently when I saw a YouTube video with the title Consciousness is Faster Than Light and clicked on it. And it was a physicist talking about how consciousness is probably sort of predicated upon entanglement or generated by entangled particles. So it's literally the oneness of the universe, the force that constitutes the oneness of the universe that gives rise to consciousness or is consciousness. It is the oneness of the universe that is consciousness, basically according to this theory, which I would assume is probably definitely correct. So yeah, I don't know. It's a weird thing. Sometimes I get them and it doesn't mean anything for years, or it means something, but I don't know what, you know. Probably not true though, I just realized, because subconsciously I'm sure I understood exactly what that meant, because I understood the relationship between, you know, our will and consciousness and our experience. So I guess I probably did, and I just didn't articulate it consciously, you know. Man, we got no interactions from TikTok tonight. Let's see. Okay, guys. Well, I guess I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. Please hit the like button, share, subscribe, and I'll see you tomorrow night. We're getting political again. I rescheduled it. I'm kind of glad I did, because every time I do that, more shit happens that is relevant. So, I mean, I would imagine by tomorrow night when I do that stream, it's going to be another level of totalitarianism that has descended down upon us. So thank you guys so much. Hit the like button, please share, subscribe, consider becoming a patron. If you're not already, you want to hang out with the cool kids, don't you? So yeah, I'll see you tomorrow.